So let's go ahead and get started with Minneapolis, where protesters stormed the church during Sunday service. Take a look.
A group of protesters stormed and disrupted a Sunday church service because of one of the pastor's possible connections to ICE. The U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights announced there would be a federal probe over this, writing this on X. The Civil Rights Division is investigating the potential violations of the Federal FACE Act by these people, desecrating a house of worship and interfering with Christian worshipers.
Look, this is an unfortunate situation because a church is supposed to be a place of peace, a place of prayer, a place of unity. And that's not what this is right here. And it's unfortunate that the violence in Minneapolis is getting out of control. It is out of control. And I think it's only going to continue to get worse because Governor Walz is not going to win against the federal government. Mayor Fry is not going to win against the federal government. The only recourse that they really have is the courts because this is America. And they already tried that. Take a look.
Late tonight, a federal judge just ruled that federal officers cannot detain or use tear gas like we see that they're using right here on peaceful protesters. And with more of these demonstrations planned throughout the weekend, local and state officials are now urging calm.
While peaceful expression is protected, any actions that harm people, destroy property, or jeopardize public safety will not be tolerated.
Look, that win in court for them means absolutely nothing because the only thing that it says is that ICE has to stay within the boundaries of the law, which is what they're doing right now. Now, I'll be honest with you. If ICE is breaking the law, lock them up. If any federal agent breaks the law or goes outside the boundaries of the law, then they need to be locked up. That's the bottom line. And to his comment about violent protests not being tolerated, well, it seems like they're being tolerated. Have you seen the violence that's being perpetuated in Minneapolis against law enforcement officers, whether they're federal or local? Law enforcement needs to be more aggressive with these protesters. You know, here in Florida, you can protest. Your First Amendment right is protected, but you need to do it within the boundaries of the law. And the boundaries of the law include doing it on the sidewalk, where you can't impede any type of operations. But I also understand the fact that the Minneapolis Police Department is very small, and they're overwhelmed right now. If I was in Tim Walz's position, I would have activated the National Guard to back them up a long time ago. And I would do that for the protection of my own citizens. But we all know what's going on here. I don't think Mayor Fry wants this to end. I don't think Tim Walz wants this to end. And I think what they want is more violence against ICE because it fits the narrative. It fits their agenda. As a matter of fact, here's the governor calling for more violence.
ICE agents are going door to door, ordering people to point out where their neighbors of color live. They're pulling over people indiscriminately, including U.S. citizens, and demanding to see their papers. And at grocery stores, at bus stops, even at our schools, they're breaking windows, dragging pregnant women down the street, just plain grabbing Minnesotans and shoving them into unmarked vans, kidnapping innocent people with no warning and no due process.
Are you guys listening to the language that he's using? People are being kidnapped in the streets by masked men? You mean being detained or arrested by federal law enforcement officers who are upholding the law? Is that what you meant, Governor? And what is the deal with schools in Minneapolis closing? Why don't students want to go to school? Why are businesses shutting down? As a matter of fact, they're floating the idea of having people not even pay rent this month, or at least until ICE leaves Minneapolis. And that's because people are afraid to go to work. So my question is, why are you afraid to go to work? If you're here legally, ICE stops you, they detain you, they ask you questions, they ask you for your papers, you provide them, and you go on your merry way. I think the biggest tragedy out of this whole thing, and the thing that really makes me angry about what's happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole, is the fact that there are people here that are here illegally, that have been working here for decades and decades and decades. If everything that's happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole wouldn't have happened, those people would still be working. Because just like in Louisiana and other places that cooperated with ICE, the federal government concentrated on going after the worst of the worst. So now what's happening is ICE is all over the place. They wouldn't have surged the way that they surged if Governor Walz and Mayor Fry would have cooperated with them. You know, and I mentioned that people don't want to go to work because they don't want to be rounded up, especially American citizens, which is absolutely absurd to me. If you're a person that's here legally or a U.S. citizen, you have nothing to fear. Go to work. But I think the bigger problem are people like the guy I'm about to show you, because he believes that these big franchises like Starbucks need to bend the knee to the liberals. Take a look.
On behalf of our coworkers, really quick, we're going to briefly pause the meeting to express some grave concerns. So last week, ICE agents murdered Renee Nicole, a beloved community member and mother of three in broad daylight. So since then, they've set up checkpoints targeting 5 cop drivers, physically assaulted teenagers, and tear gas school children. Their actions make it clear the presence of ICE agents poses a threat to everyone, most especially to our Somali, Hmong, and Hispanic neighbors. Current guidance is inadequate. We are empowered to ask ICE agents to leave if and only if they are harassing or disrupting business, but the only way to prevent this from happening in the first place is to our customers or us is to forbid them from access to the premises outright.
Okay, that's about as much as I can hear from that guy. So he wants Starbucks to reject serving federal law enforcement officers. Just like that. Just like that. Let me tell you something. When I go to Starbucks, or I don't go to Starbucks, my kids go to Starbucks. Whenever I take them to Starbucks, I don't want to hear anybody spewing any political views. I'm just there to get coffee or to get my kids whatever it is that they want. Why have these companies allowed themselves to be hijacked by these people? Why? You know, I respect everybody's opinion, but I reject those opinions when they drown out my opinions. Why can't we just respect each other's opinion and agree to disagree? Why is it that we have to resort to personal insults anytime we get into any type of discourse? And it looks like people's opinions, people's rhetoric is only continuing to get more violent. Take a look at what this Black Panther had to say.
No ICE agent ever run up on me. I guarantee you they won't. I'll put a hole in their chest the size of a window. Safe line repair, safe line replace. That's what's going to happen. They touch me. Unarmed woman was killed by ICE. If you think you're about to come and brutalize the people while we're standing here, around and find out.
What have we come to as a society when we have people in public making these types of comments? Because in the end, you know who's going to lose that confrontation, right? He is. Look, I think we need to stop being so mad at President Trump and the ICE agents who are enforcing the law. I think we need to be more angry at the politicians who put these laws on the books. But you want to know why that's not going to change? Because nobody's touching immigration. Because anybody that touches immigration commits political suicide. It's too hot to touch. Nobody's going to go near it. But instead of being angry at the politicians, people just continue to be angry. Take a listen to this.
And also, I've always been telling people that we have to get back to the ABCs of organizing, that we need agitation before, collaboration. In my state here in Tennessee, we're seeing the opposite of what we're seeing in Minnesota, where we're having the state government partner with these terror agents from ICE and say, how can we expedite this and how can we increase and expand these operations in our state? And so we are saying that we must agitate before we collaborate with these forces of violence. And it's not the first time we face them. Here in Tennessee, we had another terror group who used to wear masks and hide their identities, known as the KKK. And our the folks were celebrating this week the civil rights movement. Dr. King took them on, 10 toes down, their heads up, saying that, what we're doing is for generations yet unborn, that we will not allow violence to overcome nonviolence, and that we know that we would rather be on this side of history than to live on our knees, bowing down to the system that wants to take us backwards to a time that we don't want to go to. And so people power is the only way forward.
So his take is agitate before we collaborate. I actually agree with that. I think you have every right to agitate law enforcement officers as long as you don't impede their operations. Unfortunately, that's not what's happening. They're straight out just impeding and obstructing these law enforcement operations from taking place. And that's the problem. That is the issue. And that's what's leading to the violence. So let me address the part where he's comparing ICE to the KKK. So I want to be clear on this because I think it's very important for everybody to understand this. Some reports have ICE having as much as 30% Latinos in their ranks. 30%. Almost 50% of ICE is non-white. So it's a little bit tough to be a white supremacist when about 50% of your forces are not white. So this argument is just as stupid as the argument comparing the Middle East to Venezuela, that the operations aren't going to work because they failed in the Middle East. They're not going to work in Venezuela. How's Venezuela working out right now? But what politicians do is they just ignore these facts. They continue with their false narratives and their violent rhetoric.
It's important on this weekend and every day moving forward that we acknowledge the history that Trump alludes when he says he's going to make this country great again, a return to a time when blatant displays of outright bigotry and racism and state-sanctioned violence went unchecked. We are very clear that the residents of this here city are checking that unchecked violence.
Why do so many people say that? That when President Trump says make America great again, or anybody says that for any matter, all they're trying to do is bring us back to the days of racism and bigotry. What is wrong with just making America great again? In Minnesota, it's not about being Muslim or Somali. It's about fraud. So let me go ahead and move on to the next part, which is Nick Shirley exposing some more fraud. And when I say some more, I'm talking about tens of millions of dollars in fraud by Somali-owned transportation companies that don't even have vehicles to transport anybody. That's how blatant the fraud is in Minnesota. Now, we all know that Nick blew up so much last time that you know that his next visit wasn't going to be as nice as the first one. You know he was going to get a lot of pushback from the Somalis that live in the community. So let me show you one of the first interactions that he had when he got there.
How are you doing, man?
I just want to ask you.
Yes, sir.
Why are you sensationalizing the propaganda?
What are we sensationalizing?
To attack our community. What's your final objective?
We're not attacking your community by any means.
Are you making good money from this?
We're looking for fraud.
No,
for instance, can you answer our question? Where's Safari Transportation Company 607? It's not there. And why don't you answer?
How much money are
why don't you answer the question? Where's 617 Dreamline Security?
How much money are you making?
I make money off of YouTube. That's how I make my money.
Exactly. So you're making money off of sensationalizing.
That my job
and attacking
is
the Somali community.
I'm not attacking you guys. We're asking.
I'll tell you
fraud
the reason
is
why
fraud,
this is
sir.
happening. All right, let me tell you the reason why
fraud is fraud, correct?
Yes.
This has nothing to do with race. This is fraud.
This absolutely has to do with us being Muslim.
No, it does not.
All right, and us being from Africa. This is a constitutional argument. If you don't want us here, change the freedom of religion. Say, listen, we don't want Muslims in this country anymore.
So here we go. It's not about fraud. It's about not wanting Muslims in this country, apparently. I guess that's what they're sticking to right now. Remember, the whole thing with all the fraud that happened in Minnesota and Minneapolis and Minnesota as a whole was pushed away because they started claiming that it was a racist investigation. That the only reason that the Somalis were being targeted was because they were Somalis and they were Muslims. That was it. That enabled the massive fraud that occurred there. And you would think that the Somalis would want to talk to Nick and debate him and maybe debate the information that he's providing them. But instead, what do? They resort to what everybody always resorts to. It's racism. It's because we're Muslim. If we hated Muslims so much in this country, we wouldn't have just elected the first Muslim mayor in New York City history. Are you serious? But once again, he believes that Nick hates Muslims.
We're not saying that.
No.
We're not saying that.
When I go
Sir,
onto
we're
your
talking
comments,
about fraud. When
I go onto your comments,
my comments.
What I see is people that say we do not want Muslims here. Kick every single Muslim in Minnesota out of Minnesota.
That's a comment.
You're preparing for the Somali community to maybe be taken to concentration camps, just like the Japanese community.
So let me push back on what he just said about all those hateful comments on Nick Shirley's videos and his posts. First of all, I get the same thing in my posts as well. I get a lot of hateful comments from people. But you know what I do? I engage them in dialogue. I engage them in discourse. And about maybe 30% of the time, people actually respond without any hate. They just respond and we get into a dialogue and we debate ideas. Now, obviously, 70% of the time, they're just hateful, but that is not a reflection of who I am. I can't control what people post or what comments they put in my videos. This guy's talking about Somalis being taken to concentration camps. Are you serious? People being taken to concentration camps in America? Are you serious? What type of ignorant comment is that? Just with that simple comment, he killed his whole argument.
It's 2,000 providers. Okay, you want to sacrifice the safety of 80,000 people because of fucking 2,000 providers? Are you fucking mad? Are you stupid?
I'm not stupid. You're stupid. Where's the transportation company?
What about if a mass shooting happens in Minnesota? It will be because of you. It will be because of you. If any Somali gets hurt in Minnesota, it's because of Nick Shirley.
This is about fraud.
One single Somali gets hurt.
This is about fraud,
sir. It's because of you. Sensationalizes. You son of a bitch. Sensationalizes.
Wow, you're very nice.
Out of our neighborhood.
Very nice.
Get the out of our neighborhood.
Sir, can you tell me where the transportation company is?
Out of our neighborhood. We don't want you here. Get the out of here.
And obviously, it only continues to get worse from there. Look, I think what we're going to continue to see in Minneapolis is misdirection to ensure that we put all our effort into the violence and the protests that are happening in Minneapolis right now and away from the fraud scandal that happened in Minnesota. Minnesotans were fleeced. Billions of dollars of taxpayer money was sent overseas. Millions of dollars were being siphoned in luggages from American airports over back to Somalia. Just like that. You know what the unfortunate part is about everything that's happening in Minneapolis and Minnesota? It's that people are being used as pawns. Now, look, I'm not saying that what's going on in the streets right now is all correct. Because remember, in the last episode, I told you that they deported a young lady that was going to college, studying business, and working to help her family. They wrongly deported her. And I think the Trump administration needs to fix that ASAP. But at the same time, most of the operations that are taking place in our country are legal. And I'll repeat what I said before. If ICE officers are crossing the line, throw them in jail, lock them up. But we all know what's happening. It's not that. All right, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay balanced.